Welcome to Beyond the Reiki Gateway, a podcast reserved for the spiritually curious. Journey further with Reiki Masters Kathleen Johnson and Andrea Kennedy through in-depth conversations, many featuring inspiring and intriguing special guests to enrich your unique spiritual progression. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm Andrea Kennedy, joined by my co-host Kathleen Johnson, and our very special guest today, Eileen Day McKusick. And I want to tell you a little bit about Eileen before we get started. She's a pioneering researcher, writer, inventor, practitioner, educator, and speaker in the fields of therapeutic sound, the human biofield, and electric health. She has an MA in integrative education and has been studying the effects of sound on the human body and its electromagnetic system since 1996. She's the originator of the sound therapy method called Biofield tuning, the founder of the Biofield Tuning Institute, and author of 2 best-selling books, Tuning the Human Biofield, Healing with Vibrational Sound Therapy, and her latest release, Electric Body, Electric Health. Eileen created her own line of weighted tuning forks and accessories based on her years of clinical research, and she's a sought-after speaker, teacher, and thought leader in the fields of electric health and biofield science. We're thrilled to have you with us today, Beyond the Reiki Gateway, Eileen, and thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great having you here, Eileen. We appreciate you spending time with us. My first question for you is, my goodness, you've been involved in so many different aspects of your work throughout your career and perhaps your lifetime. So I'm wondering, and I know our listeners are wondering, how did you get started in all this? What inspired you to do this work?
Well, I think a lot of people go into the healing arts because they want to heal themselves. And that was certainly my aim. I came into needing healing through the gateway of an eating disorder. I became bulimic when I was 17, and when I was 18, I tried to stop. And it was the first time that I had an experience of myself as an addict. When you have part of you, you're like inwardly divided between the conscious mind that wants to stop the behavior and the subconscious mind that's driving the behavior. And how do you heal that gap, right? How do you bring your conscious mind, your thoughts, your desires completely in alignment with all the actions that your body is going through? That sense of wholeness, right? I think that's what everyone is looking for in healing, to not feel inwardly divided, to not be working against yourself. And so I set off on my journey to figure out how to heal my addiction to both the bulimia, but even after I stopped purging and I figured out how to do that, I still was a binger and a sugar addict and, just not in alignment in that way. And that's not a comfortable place to be, right? It's just anybody who struggled with addiction of any kind. And I think food addiction is a really hard one because you can go cold turkey on alcohol and drugs. So you can't go cold turkey on food. So you really
True.
have to learn to master the nuances of that relationship, not just with food, but with your own body, with the experience of being human. And of course, when you have any kind of addiction or disorder, your health starts to go south. And that's what happened to me. I ended up with a candida infection, which is something that happens to a lot of people who are sugar addicts. You end up with an overgrowth of candida in your system. It leads to brain fog and digestive misery and, just general misery, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was always reading books. I'm a researcher by nature, and those of us, and obviously you are as well, and people listening to podcasts generally are, you get interested in a topic and one topic leads to another and another, and, you just find yourself in these rabbit holes. And when I was around, I think it's 1996, I just happened to have gone into the part of the rabbit holes about vibrational healing and the use of color and sound and music in healing. And also coming in with the understanding that everything is vibration, right? This is sort of one of the quantum or whatever you want to call it, evolutions in thinking where we're moving from reductionist, chemical, mechanical ways of looking at things to more informational, vibrational, electromagnetic. And there is no stuff, right? We appear solid, but it's really an artifact of perception. It's all really just waves in space. We're just packets of waves in space, and we're either in harmony or we're in disharmony. And the vast majority of us in the human plane of existence at the moment are in dissonance.
That's
For
so true.
yeah,
Yeah.
for lots and lots of reasons, right? And that was part of my own healing, was realizing that my sick behavior had been programmed by my environment, and that I wasn't the only one suffering in that way. That we'd all gotten lots and lots of bad programming in the department of food and body. I mean, anybody who really manages to make it through and feels good about their relationship with food and their relationship with your body, how many people really do that? I'm always amazed by the ones that do. But anyway, I got very trapped in that. And so one day when I think I had just finished my stack of books on the topic, I got a Gaia catalog in the mail that had a set of tuning forks for healing in it. And it was the C major scale. So I decided to order them on impulse. I was like, oh, look, sound healing. And at the time I was doing a part-time massage therapy practice, and I had clients that I felt comfortable enough to ask them to be guinea pigs. And I just started playing and started making discoveries right off the bat. From the beginning, my work with tuning forks surprised me. And it surprised me over and over and over again. I think people hear tuning forks and it sounds kind of I don't know, limited. Like, oh, here's a tone. But it's not like that. If you listen deeply and you pay attention, there's all kinds of wild stuff going on. And so I made a number of discoveries that sort of formed the basis of what became biofield tuning, what we call biofield tuning now. Took a long time to evolve into what it is now. But in the beginning, I discovered that if I activated a tuning fork and I held it over the body, like the C, for example, I thought in the beginning, it was just going to sound like a C no matter where I put it. It's just going to be this objective C. But it wasn't at all. Depending on where I held it around the body, the tone would change, and sometimes very dramatically. Sometimes it would go really sharp. Sometimes it would go flat. Sometimes it would go full of static or noise. Sometimes it would feel like it was just sucked into the body and it would disappear really quickly. And then other places it would get really loud. So the instruction said you use C over the root chakra, D over the second, E over the third.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did. I was like, okay, but instead of just holding it over the chakra, I decided to scan, and be like, okay, what's going on over the hip? So if I found a loud spot, let's say over somebody's right hip, I thought I would think, okay, it's quiet over the chakra, it's loud over the hip. If there's an energy center, that's probably where more energy should be, right? And so I equated loud with more energy. So I discovered that I could use the tuning fork to click in the loud spot and actually drag it and move it. I call it click, drag, and drop from the beginning. That feeling of clicking on something, moving it, and dropping it. It's not there anymore. Now it's here. And so it wouldn't be loud over the right hip anymore. It would be loud over the energy center. And then people would say oh, my hip doesn't hurt anymore, or I'm feeling so much more relaxed, right? I'll never forget the time I was working on somebody who had sharp pain in his shoulder, and the fork went really sharp, over his shoulder. It's that sounds like it feels. He could hear it, I could hear it. But I just kept bringing the fork back to the same spot over and over. And after a little while, it wasn't sharp anymore. It sounded like C. And he got off the table and he rotated his arm and was like, all my pain is gone.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was surprised. I'm so surprised. Over and over again by what I heard and discovered. Now, early on, this was in Connecticut in the mid 90s, right? And I was telling people that I was doing sound healing with tuning forks. And of course, people were so skeptical, right? Rudely skeptical. And people would say, oh, it's room acoustics or it's the Doppler effect, right? And I was like, I get all of that. I understand room acoustics. There's something else going on, and it took me a long time to figure out what was going on. But now I understand it, that everything in the body is in motion, and everything in motion makes waves, and waves propagate. And we've all had the experience of getting a good vibe off of somebody or a bad vibe off of somebody, right? We sense it. We can sense it across a room. Like we just know. And so it's because we do give off vibes and we can sense vibes. We have little antennas on our cells that like sense vibes. It's like the biological apparatus of what we call instinct or intuition. And so even though these waves are very high frequency and they're very low amplitude, a tuning fork also produces high frequency, low amplitude overtones. Like a tuning fork, especially the aluminum ones I use, produce like a whole range, technically infinite. And so what seems to be happening is that the body's emissions are intersecting at that very high overtone level and then precipitating down through the octaves into the hearing level. So what the tuning forks allow me to do is actually hear the sounds that the body is making.
Interesting.
Mm. That is really, really fascinating. And what has stood out to me so far, Eileen, is how fortunate you were. Well, number one, isn't that synchronicity that you got that catalog in the mail, right? And then,
Sure.
yeah, like no accidents. But then you had people willing to be your guinea pigs. And you learned by experience, by trial and error, making observations. I would have to imagine, hearing about the shoulder, that one little story out of probably thousands by now, that had to have been so exciting for you. I mean, it had to have just been mind blowing at the time, having that experience of being able to play like that and really just gather the information in such an organic way. I just think that that's really quite remarkable. And the other thing too is I so appreciate us honing in on biofield tuning, what you've developed, because we've heard from the listeners that they have a quite an interest in sound healing. And biofield tuning would be a subset of sound healing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I break it down in my book that sound healing is a really broad category. Underneath it is sound therapy. And so biofield tuning is really more of a sound therapy. It's a very prescriptive, structured practice that's based on this map that I've created. It's actually quite technical. And so it's very different than somebody playing bowls for a group of people. That's almost more music or music healing, right? Music,
Hmm.
but that's different than music therapy, which is also very structured and, comes
Mm,
with a whole sort of package of structure there. But it all falls under the category of sound healing, even music therapy.
interesting.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I'm interested in the biofield tuning area as well. I'm curious what stood out to me when you were discussing your journey to this. Were you guided to drag and drop, as you said? How did you come up with that? That's just so interesting to me that I don't know that I would have thought to do that. And I'm just curious as to how did that happen?
Well, I think that I've been guided all along on my journey. I graduated from high school when I was 16, and I went to a prep school where everybody went to college, and I was the only person in my class that didn't go to college. And from making that decision, then I was on my own. I had to make up my own life that was not following the prescribed trail. And so it involved a lot of like deep listening. I'm like, okay, I know I don't want to go to college, so what do I want to do? And and so I started traveling. I started waitressing, saving lots of money, and then taking off on trips. I took my first trip by myself when I was 17. I went to Europe for 8 months when I was 18 and backpacked by myself. And when I was 20, I spent 4 months backpacking in Australia. So when you go off on adventures like that, you have to learn to trust yourself. You have to learn to trust your own inner guidance, your own inclinations, your own curiosity. And so I was very secure in trusting my own curiosity about the process. I've heard lots of people say, "Oh, I have tuning forks, but I don't know how to use them." Well, I didn't know how to use them either. I just use them. You know what I mean? I use them without any kind of like, am I doing it right or wrong? I just use them. Like, what is happening here? Right? What happens when I do this? So just
Yeah.
a simple observation of like, okay, when I do this, this happens. It's really science experimenting is really what it is. What happens if I
Right.
do this? What happens if I do that? Oh, wow, that happened with every person. And so just with repeated use, I started to learn. I learned this there's a whole language of vibration that every emotion, every time we're feeling a particular emotion, we make a particular waveform that sounds a particular way in the fork. So every single human emotion has this unique frequency signature that you can hear in the forks. Every pathology, actually, if you think about everything being in motion, if it's in the right motion, it makes a nice sound. If it's clunking along, it's gonna make a funky sound. And so, just like a mechanic learns to diagnose cars by the sounds that they're making, I've learned to diagnose what's going on in a body by the sound that it's making because it's universal. It's the same from everybody. And even discovered that this language of vibration, especially the emotional part, is the same. Like all of nature speaks this language. Like animals totally know your vibe, right? Your dog knows when you're sad because it's
Hmm.
the same way. And we've even learned that plants recognize intention and good vibes and bad vibes, right? All of nature is communicating vibrationally, and the tuning forks actually reveal this language. It's so wild, and it's such a pure language. Like you can't hide from the tuning forks. Like I'll figure out anything that's going on in you. Like you just can't hide because you're giving off the vibe.
The energy doesn't lie, honestly. It just doesn't. That's interesting. And underneath everything you just said, there is a strong curiosity, that desire to know more, to learn more, and to continue to expand and grow. And Andrea and I have had conversations about curiosity as recently as today. It's so important. And that is a foundational part of who you are. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very curious. In my life, whenever I've had the choice between to do something safe and to do something interesting, I've always chosen what's interesting. My life has been interesting as a
Right.
consequence. So, this was very interesting. Now, did I feel safe doing it? No, because I was judged so harshly being, this hippie from Vermont waving tuning forks around. I mean, it's an easy target for skeptics of energy medicine. And I was
Sure.
particularly sensitive to that. Like, I used to own a really busy restaurant, and I tell people that I own the Vanilla Bean. They'd be like, "Oh, I love that place." And tell people I'm doing sound healing with tuning forks, and they're like, "Okay."
I
Ah,
can imagine.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a much easier row to hoe now. Most people have heard of sound healing, but back then, no. And it started to change around 2012, but like in the collective, people started to become more open. I really noticed
Mm.
a difference right around. But I'd also, by 2012, I had gone to college as an adult, gone to college 5 years full time, and gotten a master's in education. And I'd written a master's thesis called Exploring the Effects of Audible Sound on the Human Body and its Biofield. Because I felt
Mm,
like in order to bring it out in the world and not get tomatoes thrown at me, it would help if I had some degrees. But I also used that opportunity to try to understand what I was encountering from an academic and scientific perspective. And when I first started working on my master's, I was looking up human energy field and aura in like PubMed. Search engines. Like, I was like, what am I doing? Trying to write
Yeah.
about this. Uh, but then I was reading a book by Gary Schwartz called The Energy Healing Experiments, which you guys might be familiar
mhm.
with. And in it, I was introduced to the term biofield. And I learned that wow, there is a scientific Western medicine terminology for this. And then I was able to find papers, people who are actually friends and colleagues now, Dr. Shamini Jan, Dr. Paul Mills, good friends of mine, had written these pioneering papers. Beverly Rubik, very important person in the biofield, because what I discovered through my explorations was that the body has an electrical system
Mm,
and we're never taught about.
Right.
right.
And so I couldn't understand why and how the sound was working the way that it was because I didn't understand that it was electrical. We're so conditioned to look at ourselves chemically and mechanically that this whole idea that there's electric current running through us and a magnetic field around us It took a long time for it to sink in to me, like what was going on. And then when I finally understood it, I'm like, oh, anything that has electric current running through it, even a bar magnet, right? If you take a bar magnet, you put a piece of paper on top and you sprinkle iron filings, it's going to form in the shape of a torus. So toroidal magnetic fields surround electric currents. And that's what I can, and this is the biofield, the idea that there is a magnetic field and maybe other aspects of electromagnetism that are more subtle that we don't necessarily understand, but are encompassed in the definition of chi. And if you translate chi into English, it really is electricity. It's like the flow of current. So what is the energy in energy medicine? It's electricity. What is the biofield? It's your magnetic field. Like, it's so simple.
It is. It is, right? Well, and on some level, we know this because we can have an EKG and it shows the electrical activity of the heart, or an EEG for the brain. So we know at some level, but then to make that leap to the understanding you have today, it's just really incredible. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the biofield and how you engage with the biofield. You've mapped it, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I discovered, and it took, I don't know, 4 years or so of exploring this tonal landscape, that's like hidden in plain view. There's this whole sort of tonal landscape in our own personal cloud that we carry around with us wherever we go. And I've come to see the body's electrical system. Well, first of all, the term biofield was coined to describe the field, right? Which may or may not exist, according to some people. But the deeper I went into it, the more I came to see that it's like two sides of the same coin. Like, you can't separate what's going on in the field from the fact that the heart is beating electrically, or that the brain waves are going, or that your blood has charge, or your bones are electric. You can't separate the magnetic field from the electric current. So I kind of went rogue and changed the definition to the electrical system in its entirety. No, there's other people that wouldn't necessarily agree with me, but I just don't. It's all one thing. It's like, you can't tease out. This is part of the problem of reductionist thinking that wants to like tease everything into bits. But it's
Right.
the system in its entirety. It is toroidal shapes. We draw negative charge from the surface of the earth, and we draw this up the central channel. We draw positive charge from the atmosphere and the sun, and this is the descending current that goes down. They spiral around each other. So like the Ida and the Pingala in the Vedic perspective is the negative and positive electric charges spiraling around each other in this toroidal structure. Very often, depictions of the aura or the human energy field, sort of denser, closer in, but then sort of fades out. So that was kind of what I thought it was. But I actually discovered, no, there's a bubble with a boundary, and that boundary is kind of like the Earth's ionosphere, or, it's a
Mhm.
double layer plasma membrane, because our electric body is a plasma, which is a flow of electrical current, right? We are totally electric beings, and we are electric beings in an electric environment, drawing our electric nourishment from our electric environment, breathing in a plasma. Basically, the air has charge. Oxygen has free electrons. It's brimming with electricity, and you breathe it in, it goes in your blood becomes lighter, right? Oxygen depleted blood is darker. It's because it has light in it. It has electric juice. That's what we want. It
Mhm.
feeds our electrical body. So I've come to see it as mind, conscious mind, subconscious mind. It's where all our memories are stored. So if you think about it, everything that we experience, right? Everything we see and we smell and we touch and we taste and we feel and we hear, just all of our experience of being human are all electrical impulses. So it makes sense that our memory is all stored in our electrical system. And that's what I observed in exploring biofield, was that there appeared to be standing waves within the boundary, just like radio waves bounce off the ionosphere and create standing waves, or the Schumann resonance. It's the same thing. We have these standing waves in our own field that hold all of this information that's vibrationally and magnetically encoded. And so I discovered that very specific memories are stored in very specific areas. This is the biofield anatomy map. And then it's the same
Mhm.
from person to person. And that wherever we have a traumatic memory, there's charge there. part of your
Hmm.
electrical system is like frozen in a bad spot. When I first started combing through the field, right? Because initially I just did the thing over the body. But then one day in 2006, I discovered a loud spot out here, moved it in, and had a very dramatic healing outcome. I was like, wow, that was weird. What else is out here? Curiosity, right? And I just started
Hmm.
exploring. Everybody who came in, like, I'm as far away as I can be in my room. And I'm like, there's channels and walls and rivers and like file drawers. There's all kinds of stuff going on here, like a whole anatomy and physiology was the same from person to person, right? Just like our digestive organs are all in the same place. Our biofield anatomy is the same from person to person, whether you're right-handed or left-handed, whether I'm in the southern hemisphere or the northern hemisphere, it's still the same. So,
Mm.
which is really wild to discover all that too, right? So, when I first started combing through the field and I'm hitting these areas of charge, and it's dawning on me that they're traumatic memories and that I'm bringing them back to the midline, back to now. I was like, wow, this is like sonic soul retrieval. The idea in the shamanic tradition where when you have a trauma, part of the soul breaks off and gets left behind, and the practitioner will go and find it and bring it and blow it or place it back into the body. And so here I was doing the same thing. I'm like, wow, I'm combing through a person's memory banks, finding like, this inner child that is stuck at age 5 in this traumatic experience as light, electricity and ushering it back into the central channel where it goes into flow. So moving places from freeze into flow by bringing that energy back into the present moment and the
Mm.
circulatory aspect of the electrical system.
I have a question about that, Eileen. You're saying the midline is the present moment. And so can you talk a little bit about that? If you're out in the field, is there a structure according to time that you can tell us about?
Yeah. So what I discovered was that, just like when our hair grows, it moves away from us. So your body and all of its movements are like a little readout on an EEG. And so everything you feel is like getting laid down vibrationally and it's moving away from you. So information I find within that boundary is gestation. Just inside that boundary is birth. And then it's like dropping a needle on an album and reading the vibrational record of somebody's life up until present time. So if
Oh.
somebody's 60 and everybody's field is about 6 feet, like even kids' fields, are proportionately, it's like as we get older, our hard drive fills up. Kids have a lot more space. Why memory retrieval gets harder for older people because there's just so much data to
Right.
sift through, right? Um,
Oh.
and so if you're 60 and your field extends about 6 feet away, I'm going to find memories that were generated when you were 30, 3 feet away from your body.
Oh, that's just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so anybody can work from the map and find specific memories within people's fields. Now, here's the thing, that's not the way that I work. I don't go in with an agenda to find anything. Like the whole premise, and I think this is true with really any of the energy medicines, we want to listen first in sound healing. It's not about me coming in with my C to tune you at all. It's about me listening to the stories that your body wants to tell me.
Mm.
Most of these things, and especially these traumatic memories, when I've gone into them and listened, you don't need to tell me what happened because I feel it. I'm resonating with it. I'm an empath. You guys are probably empaths too. I struggled so much with my permeable vibrational nature, until I
Oh,
figured
yes.
out how to stabilize my own signal, become a strong, coherent emitter, and now I overtake any incoherence around me. Like I just make it coherent. And it took me a long time to get there because I was like, you're bad vibes. Yes.
I
Wow.
know the feeling. I know the feeling well. I have to say, Eileen, I am so glad you said about the hard drive getting full. I've been using that sentence for years because if I forget something, I'll say, "Look, I'm getting old." Now I say I am old, My hard drive is full. Give me a break. And it's
Yeah.
nice to know that you just validated that for me. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it really is like that. And honestly, I hate to give you the bad news, but I already know this too. Like the older you get, the harder it is to change your patterns. It takes a
Oh,
lot more
sure.
inputs. Like I really like working with 17 to 24-year-olds, because they're still very malleable. You can shift them. They're kind of like chiropractic adjustments. What I do, we call it an adjustment when you comb through a particular area of the field and you kind of gather up energy, drop it into the midline and into the now. And then we focus it. So we comb in from the side, drop into the middle, and then if somebody's lying on the table, we move the fork up towards the ceiling. I call this columning, and what that does is it just helps
Oh,
focus the energy. And sometimes people ask me why I do that, and I was like, well, when I figured out the combing, it didn't feel complete, and I was curious what wanted to happen, and it just wanted to go up. I was like, okay, that's what wants to happen. It's a
okay.
lot of like asking, listening, what's going on and what wants to happen? What's the body trying to do? How can I get underneath it and help it? How can I give it a leg up with what it's already trying to do? And it might be
Yeah.
very different than what the person thinks they're there to work on because we don't
Hmm.
really work with a conscious mind. We work with the body's organizing intelligence, which is so intelligent. Our bodies are so brilliant. This is another thing that surprised me with this work. I've been blown away over and over again by the intelligence of the human body and its ability to self repair. Now, the reason why the tuning forks work is because we're self tuning instruments. When the body hears itself sharp or flat, it doesn't like that. Just like you don't like looking in the mirror and seeing that your hair is a mess and that you have a poppy seed in your teeth, right? You go to fix that immediately. When your body hears itself out of tune, it was like immediately like, what can I relax? What can I release? What can I do so that I sound harmonious? We're designed to be in harmony because
Hmm.
all of creation is in harmony. Like somehow our signal got really corrupted and all of this dissonance is rattling around. It's come down through the generations through addiction and abuse. And, there's this like, and it's
Right.
not our fault.
Yeah.
I
We
get
blame
it.
ourselves and we feel guilty, but we're the inheritors of a huge tonal mess.
Absolutely.
Those of us who are doing healing now, deep healing, like you two are, like your audience is, we're doing very heavy lifting. Like my parents didn't do this kind of healing. Did your parents?
No.
No.
No. You
No.
see that? We're the first generation to be like rolling up our sleeves and getting into the muck and being like, I have to clear up all of this noise and nonsense. I can't tell you how many people would come to me. Now, my practice, when I really started to ramp it up, I was in the middle of nowhere, this tiny little town in the mountains of Vermont, population of like 3,000 people, poor, rural, conservative. And here I am, like waving tuning forks around people, no sign on the door. Person after person would come in and say, I'm here to clean up my ancestral lineage. And I was like, great. I don't know how you found me, but that's what we do here. So there's a lot of us who seem to be programmed to want to do this deep healing. And so I just want to tell you all is you're not just healing yourself. You're healing your ancestors, you're healing a very sick culture. You're doing very heavy lifting.
Hmm.
All right. So
Yeah.
be patient with yourself. Be loving with yourself. Don't expect that you're going to heal it tomorrow. I've received at this point thousands of biofield tuning sessions, ones I've conducted on groups and put myself in, that I've received from tuners that I've just conducted on myself. And, I feel a lot better. I'm certainly healthy and resilient, but do I still yell at my husband sometimes? Yes. So, we don't need to be Buddha or Christ. We can be human beings, and be okay with our humanity and the difficulty it is right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Hmm.
I just love so much of what you just said.
Me too.
Such an important message too for everyone because I think we're so hard on ourselves sometimes and we do expect to have that instant change or why is this so hard? And if I'm hearing you correctly, part of it is we're lifting things we're not even aware of, things we can't even see. And
Hmm.
so, no wonder we're tired.
Yeah.
Or
It's really true.
discouraged.
It's
Yeah.
really true. And that's a really good way to put it. You are lifting things that you can't even see.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Generations. I can't tell you how strongly influenced we are by the burdens of our ancestors.
Mhm.
I
Wow.
didn't realize that. I think American culture is so like now and forward and forget the old country. And like, we don't even, we've been colonized too. I don't know the traditions of my ancestors at all because we were like, forget about them. So we're disconnected from that influence and that awareness of like just how informed we are, not only in our struggles, but also our gifts.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yes. That's a very important point. I have more and more clients coming to me these days with the purpose of uncovering their ancestral issues and clearing them. And I've noticed that trend, I would say, in the past perhaps 2 years. So what you said is very resonant for me and the work I do. And once we really delve in, what Andrea said, we're lifting things we're not even aware of, and we're also carrying things we're not aware of. Big
Yeah.
time,
Big
you
time.
know. Hmm.
Yeah.
Big time. But in that way, we're also stronger than we realize we are.
Yes, that's a good way to look at it. We absolutely are, because we're carrying a lot of other people's stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. What an image I get in my mind,
I know, makes me
listening
feel
to that
tired.
exchange.
Makes me feel tired. Time to take a nap.
I've got the good news here, and that is that so in the biofield anatomy, there are features called the ancestral rivers. And these appear to me, they feel like rivers. They flow down either side of our body about 10 inches on either side. The left one contains the song of the DNA of your mother's lineage, and the right one contains the song of the DNA of your father's lineage, what I call energenetics, which is sort of like the
Mm.
tone of this song, right? It's different than epigenetics. Epigenetics is what they went through in their environment and how that informed them, but this is more their internal symphony, right? How you
Mhm.
feel inside. So if people feel anxious or they feel depressed or they feel scrambled or, if there's a tradition of alcoholism, like I can really hear that. Like in alcoholic families, problems don't ever get solved.
Mm.
They just keep on going, right? And if that alcoholism keeps going, you hear that lack of resolution. I mean, if you come from a lineage of alcoholism, you come from generations where problems didn't get solved. So if you're hearing me like, I'm the one to solve the problems, you have a whole heap of problems to solve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but we can change the tone. Like just sticking a fork in the river, you hear all of the noise, but then it starts to harmonize. But you hear the gifts, you hear the strengths. These people are all survivors. They made it, they
Mhm.
procreated. So there's a beauty and there's a music in there, but the signal is corrupted in most people. And so
Mm.
just by hanging out, just like we're self tuning, right? Our whole lineage all throughout time and space responds to any inputs we put here. It feels like it goes upstream to the ancestors. And I've had many mystical experiences where ancestors have appeared, sometimes groups of them. Like
Mm.
when you start to get into that mystical realm where sound can bring you, there can definitely be a sort of shamanic element of altered states and altered perception in the medium of sound healing. And even though for the most part, I'm like, this is scientific, it is all, there's a whole other dimension of reality here that is real in its own way. And you can perceive that. And when ancestors come in, they come in with a cool breeze. And you
Oh.
can
Oh.
feel it on your skin. I've had classrooms where everyone's suddenly gotten goosebumps because ancestors showed up and you can feel it. So if you're ever working with people and you start to feel that cool breeze, know that the ancestors are showing up. So, and they're grateful. They're grateful for being released from judgment. I had a very distinct time once when I was working with this woman who was really struggling to forgive her father. She had injured her right ankle because he was always giving her a hard time and he was a difficult character, right? So she was like rah about dad. And I'm working off of her right ankle in the ancestral river and her deceased dad shows up. And she was able in that whole interaction to forgive him. I mean, to like truly, deeply forgive him. And I got to witness how his energy responded in being forgiven. Like he was released. And what was so
Mm.
amazing was that her ankle, which had been sort of perpetually swollen, the swelling went down on the table. And when she got up and walked, it was completely different. And that was forgiveness, right, of an ancestor. So really incredible things can happen if you're open to it, depending on the person you're working with and where they're at. Because if they're kind of exist on those planes, then that's where you meet. Whereas if, it's Joe Plumber who's here because his knee hurts, we're probably not going to talk to his ancestors.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a really interesting observation because I think people who practice any sort of healing modality can
Oh,
totally
yes.
recognize that in their own practice as well. But wow, I'm wondering too about sounds of everyday life. We're bathed in sounds all the time, and some we have no control over, and others, maybe we do. Maybe, we turn off the TV with the news playing so it's not in the background all day. Do you have any thoughts about that, Eileen, about just everyday sounds and how they might be affecting us without us even knowing?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I hope in the future we become as a race more mindful of noise pollution because
Mm.
it's definitely stressful to people. I did a session once on the ears and I couldn't believe how much stress there was in the ears. Whether it's your alcoholic father yelling at you or NPR, doom slaying you with things that rip your heart out. Or mainstream news pitting people against each other. So much of what comes in our ears is actually not beautiful, not harmonious, not sustaining and life giving and healing. I was doing a session this morning and the guys came by on the lawnmower and the leaf blower. Like, leaf blower, all he did was blow the leaves around. Like, I was like, what are you doing? Um, like, actually, South Burlington here in Vermont banned leaf blowers, and I'm glad they did. I mean, it's so offensive and not a healthy thing for someone to be wearing either. You're much better
Mhm.
on, it's much healthier to be out there on the rake. I gotta tell you. So yeah, even things like the sound your fridge makes or fluorescent lights make. There's all kinds of low level stuff. I used to in my restaurant. I used to own a big kitchen with like lots of compressors and we would be under fluorescent lights and the dishwasher would be going and compressors are going and
Mm.
things are sizzling on the stove and all this and then the power would go out and everyone would go because we were all holding tension against
Mhm.
that background noise without even realizing we were doing it. This is something that I've only recently sort of figured out and started speaking to, but I've really come to the conclusion I like to boil things down in their most simplest essence, right? Like, what's the simplest way that we can look at this? Pretty much everything that ails us is tension related. Think of any kind of disorder and kind of trace it back to holding some kind of tension.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And so healing is really about relaxing and releasing tension. And so much of the tension that we're holding is around sound, whether it's sound we're trying to hold in because we don't want to speak our truth or we don't want to blow our emotions on people or whatever, or sound that we're trying to hold out, like our spouse yelling at us or our cat barfing on the carpet or like whatever, whatever sound we're reacting to. And so there's all this tension as a consequence of sound. And even what I've discovered when I'm finding these loud spots in the body, there's sound in there. There's energy, right? It's light, but it's also sound. It's photons and phonons. It's like what you stub your toe, and, suck it in, You
Mhm.
get beat up by
Right.
your older brother, but you can't yell because your mom will yell at you if you yell. So suck it in, right?
Yeah.
So much of healing and sound healing, and especially the way my work has evolved, is around releasing the sounds and just
Mhm.
making sound. In fact, my work kind of branched off into a collaboration with Isaac and Torald Corin, who are also known as the Brothers Corin. And what they do is they facilitate people who don't think they can sing to sing. They work
Mm.
with people, they hold their hand, they even get you to record songs. They really work people through, and it's an amazing service because so few people really love their voices. And a big part of healing and becoming more free and more whole is finding your true voice, your singing voice that you're comfortable with and enjoying that. Because it's one of life's greatest pleasures is to sing and to sing with others. It's so healing.
Mhm.
And yet I would say 85% of people out there are not at liberty to do that. And I was one of them. So I can speak in front of people. I can speak in front of 1,000 people. I don't even get nervous. But the thought of singing to people made me feel like I'd been, murdered horribly in thousands of lifetimes doing such a thing, like talk about heavy lifting. Like, I don't know what my soul has been through, but for whatever reason, I was like, this lifetime we're working through this. So, um, so I started working with them to go through their process. But one of the exercises that they do is this idea as your body as an instrument and sounding from different parts of your body. And what I discovered as I started sounding from different parts was that I'd clean out one part. I was like, oh, there's like a whole den of despair in here that I just don't go there. Like, I don't despair. I don't let myself despair. But there's still this little den of despair in me and it's all shut down, but there's still sound trapped in it, right? Kind of like open it up.
Mhm.
Like, what the sound that's in there? And, and as I kind of opened one locked box, I would lead to another and another and another. And so this process with them, they usually did in a couple sessions with people. I managed to stretch out for months, just months. I'm like, oh, there's that. Oh, and what the whole thing evolved into was this whole body of work called Sing the Body Electric. And this
Hmm.
concept of the sonic anatomy, where we discovered that the body has particular sounds that resonate in particular parts of the body. So, for example, your tailbone resonates with wah. And if you hang out and just go wah, but really bring your awareness down at your tailbone, you can actually really resonate it down there. And each energy center has a sound that goes forward and backwards. So the heart is ya, and any kind of ya, you make any kind of sound. The back is rar. And so you make that like rar sound, right? So there's 12 tones. And then we also discovered a whole bunch more what we call demitones that resonate in particular organs. For example, the kidneys are go, and that also resonates the knee too, right? So we sat around in Zoom meetings and came up with this whole thing, like making all these sounds and like figuring out what resonated for the three of us. And the work that I've done with them, so we've done 3 virtual Sing the Body Electric programs, has been amazing. It has been so liberating, certainly for me, but for the people we do it with, because it's this sounding, right? It's like we're all like pipe organs that are all rusty and clogged and like batting out one. And, and so this cleans out the pipes so that you can express yourself more freely and more joyfully. Now we do this exercise. We have everybody sing happy birthday to themselves at the beginning of the workshop. And then we have everybody sing happy birthday to themselves at the end. And the
Oh.
difference is amazing because everybody becomes more playful and more creative and they enjoy it more. And they're like, oh my God, this is the whole point of singing. It's playful, it's creative, it's enjoyable, right? It's expressive. It makes these sounds. The reason why we're all so full of sound is because we're not singing. We're not, that's what humans do. They sing and dance in every
Mhm.
culture. It's such important medicine. So the tuning fork, so if you use the tuning forks on the outside, right? I'm coming in on the outside, but then I also get people making tones in particular areas so that they're shifting it from the inside. And
Mhm.
it's a lot more empowering when you're like, wow, I can kind of help fix this with my own voice too.
That's the word that I was just about ready to offer was empowering.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Very much.
to feel like you're an instrument in your own healing like that.
Mhm.
That's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And, I have a great story about that and how helpful this can be. Torald's daughter would get car sick anytime that they went. She'd be throwing up. So, what they started doing was toning the vowels of the lower abdomen from the sonic anatomy in the car. And as long as she was toning, she said, like, if they had to, like, their place in the mountains is like 2 hours away. For the first hour, the whole family is toning with her the vowels that stabilize the lower GI. And then once they got through that, then they could go on to singing songs and stuff. But she basically figured out like she so resourceful, right? Got these tools in my environment. I'm going to use this. I'm going to empower myself to use my own voice to heal me. Not go get the pill, not go get the band, not get this, not take anything. You know what I mean? I'm just going to use my own voice to solve this problem. What an incredible lesson that
Yeah.
she figured out at like age 6 or 7 and will take that on the rest of her life. Like, how can I fix this with my voice? Like, we don't really need anything else potentially.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
The chemical, mechanical, I don't know, whatever it is,
Paradigm.
propaganda
Yeah, it is
over the
propaganda.
years has done a great disservice to humanity. It's nice to see that we're beginning to come out of it, I believe. Like you said, we're probably, the first wave of people actually doing this in a way that is substantive.
Mm.
Substantive, yes, absolutely. I mean, I've seen some incredible healing taking place in my loved ones, my circles. Not only the people who are availing themselves to biofield tuning, but when you kind of get into the lifestyle of it, you start to find other resources and to support yourself and to grow and to heal. And the transformation that I've seen is incredible and so inspiring. Just even in my own teaching, when I first started teaching biofield tuning, we had level 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And people become certified after level 3, but then level 4 is kind of like a bonus one. And I watched students become lighter and lighter and lighter until in my level 4 classes, everyone had lightened up so much that they were all funnier and more playful. And we would sit and giggle, like all of us just over and over again. And somebody said to me, they had gone through some other school of healing, and they said the higher you go in the levels there, the more serious it becomes. But in biofield tuning, it's the exact opposite because all of this stuff, all of these traumas that are in your field are heavy. You know, you
Mhm.
don't you don't feel lighthearted. You're not feeling playful. The witty jokes are not coming to you when you're really stuck in your stuff. But when that energy is liberated, and it really is like rescuing your inner child, right? And children are playful. What do children do?
Right.
They play. So I think
Mhm.
that this is the whole aim of healing and holding and bringing ourselves back, be ye as little children, that you become more playful and more lighthearted. Even in difficult situations, you can bring more grace, more presence into them
Mhm.
through this whole process of lightening up. And so, I think sometimes people may lose sight, like, why am I trying to heal or what? Because you'll have more fun.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds frivolous, but it's true.
It's a great reason, I think. Why not? Who doesn't want more fun in their lives, right?
Yeah. I think we just take everything so seriously.
We do.
I love the story too about how she helped herself and she's so young. I got goosebumps when you said that because, the future generations, the
Yes.
possibilities. Early on, when you were talking, Eileen, and describing how you were experimenting and traveled the world and you didn't go to college like everybody else, it takes a certain amount of fearlessness, I think, to do that and trust. And then you went to college later when you saw the value? Because had you gone right after high school, what on earth would you have studied? You would have just picked something maybe because you didn't really know yourself or where you were headed. And unfortunately, that's what's happening to a lot of our younger people today. But everything about your story just seems to weave itself together just brilliantly. At least that's my sense. Now, you've shared this new work that I didn't even really know about. So that's super exciting. And I was going to ask you what's next in the field. And maybe that's it. But is there anything else that you're seeing on the horizon?
Well, it's interesting because of COVID. We were supposed to teach Sing the Body Electric live and in person in 2020 and 2021, 2022. I don't know. We had them lined up at Omega and at Esalen, and I was so excited. But then I never got vaccinated, so I was discriminated against and was not able to go and teach there, which was so disappointing. But we ended up doing them virtually, which we got a lot out of. So I still haven't had the experience of actually doing the Sing the Body Electric program live with people. And we're doing our first one in December. The Shift Network is putting on a sound healing retreat at Asilomar.
Oh,
And they invited me to be a guest faculty, and they invited Isaac and Torald. So they invited us separately. And then we're having a meeting working on Sing the Body Electric stuff. And it dawns on us that we're going to be together at this event. And we were like, let's be together because it's way more fun. I like doing my thing and they like, but when the three of us get together, we just have so much fun, which is why we like doing it. And so I'm really curious, what the experience will be like doing this work live with an audience and where that might want to go. Because I think both they and I feel like we want to do more of it. We want to reach bigger audiences because the work is so powerful and so transformative. I can stand up there and do a tuning fork healing on a group, and that will have some impact. But getting an entire group to tone, to just freely make sounds and not care how awful they sound, because it's really about sounding awful. It's not about sounding good. There's so much freedom in it that nobody's trying to sound good because we're cleaning pipes, right? I mean, just like when orchestras are warming up, nobody cares how it sounds. That's what it is. It's so sandbox, right? So it's so liberating to just be free to make these sounds, but have it be along a structure. It's not just blah. It's like, now we're gonna make sound going this way and we're going to resonate here. So it's very tactical, and it really puts you in your body. So many of us who've been traumatized, we're not in our body, we're not embodied. And as a consequence, we're not empowered. And
mhm.
what I've been searching for all along for me, is embodiment, empowerment, health, and freedom. That's what you asked me, like, what brought me into it. It was the desire for those things. And I feel like through the work with the Biofield tuning, which kind of got the field in order, but now the sounding from the inside out, it's really like a whole package deal that does make you feel whole, that does help you to find the seat of your soul within your own body in this moment and enjoy that beingness, right? And what more could we ask for than that? Helping other people to get there, which is so rewarding to me. It's just so rewarding. So the more people that I can get embodied and empowered and, and healthy, and I have fun doing it. And the most fun for me is with the brothers doing this work. So that's probably where things will go.
Ah,
That is so
amazing.
exciting. You're actually getting me excited because I'm one of those people who don't like my voice, don't ever want to sing in public. And it just sounds so intriguing that actually might be something I could enjoy, maybe even,
Yeah.
love. So
I love hearing you say that.
it's true. I'm thinking as you're talking about it, like, wow, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that.
I can attest to that too. Kathleen has often said, "Oh, I just don't like my voice."
I just don't. So, what can I say?
And we do a podcast, so isn't that
Well.
just ironic?
Well, I mean, I think that you must like your voice to some degree, Kathleen, because otherwise you wouldn't do a podcast,
Hmm.
right?
True.
So,
True.
and I would say that your voice is not offensive in any way because people are perfectly happy to listen to you, and I'm happy to talk to you. So,
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. I think I've just gotten used to it over the years, Eileen. It's my voice. And I said it like I said to Andrea earlier, take it or leave it. This is what it is, right? But I love the idea of sing the body electric. Or is that sing the electric body?
Sing the Body Electric. Yeah.
Okay, I got it right the first time. Cool.
Able
I
to
love that
turn
idea.
on and tune in and sing out.
I love that. It is so interesting.
I love it too.
This has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed having you here today. I've learned so much in a really short period of time.
Nice. Well, that's what I always aim to do. I'm crazy about efficiency, and I always want to, deliver the most efficient information and practice, right? So that we can get on with other stuff.
Move on. Right. I got it.
Well, and I'm with Kathleen on this too, because it's been so informative, enlightening, and it's just been a delight to have you with us today, Eileen. And I think this is an episode that our listeners may want to listen to more than once because there is a lot here. And can you please share with them how to find out more about your work and your upcoming events?
Sure. So we have a couple of websites, biofieldtuning.com And then there's a store, biofieldtuningstore.com. We sell tuning forks, recorded sessions of tuning fork treatments for all kinds of stuff, which might sound a little weird, but people find them helpful. There's also a handful of free ones there, so you can try them first. We have practitioners all over the world, and we have a Find a Practitioner page on the website. There's also a website called electrichealth.com. If this whole idea that you have an electrical system and that the environment is electric, if that's all new to you and you want to learn more about that, there's all kinds of information there. There's peer-reviewed science articles. If anybody's doing any scholarly research on the biofield, on energy healing, anything like that, I've compiled a whole bunch of scholarly articles on the biofield there that you can access, and also a whole bunch of mainstream articles about the electric nature of life, things that you wouldn't expect. The moon is magnetic and soil bacteria is electric, and like all this stuff that I found over the last few years that is really eye-opening. Like there's this whole other dimension of our being and the world around us that we didn't learn about in school, and it's light and it's connected and it's beautiful to know about. I think that a lot of people feel dark and dim and disconnected because they don't know about plasma. They don't know about the light that is, and there is no separation, right? Like the light that's in me, my electrical system, that's the same light that powers the sun. It's the same light that's in everything. It's all one light. And so this idea that our body has an electrical system and that, like I said, it's your mind, your conscious mind. I think it's also your soul, because it leaves your body when you die, your light goes out, right? And that can't die. That's an eternal thing. So I think that the idea of the biofield really marries science and spirituality. Like your inner light is biological, it's your electrical system, but it's also your soul. So let's stop trying to separate science and spirit and realize that it's all one thing. So anyway, lots of stuff like that at Electric Health.
Thanks for sharing all those resources. Sounds like there's a lot there to sink our teeth into. We appreciate that. So well said, Eileen. You're just such a wealth of information and inspiration. And again, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, ladies. It's my pleasure.
We thank you again for joining us. And of course, we invite you to join us next time as we journey beyond the Reiki Gateway with Kathleen Johnson and Andrea Kennedy.